Hello, everybody. We're going to give it a few moments while we're waiting for this to load up, but welcome to Lunch and Learn today. Today is June 13th, 2024. So we'll get started in a few moments. We did have some pre-submitted questions, so we'll kind of start with those. But if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can start putting some eyes on them. So we'll get started here in about 2 minutes or so, 12:05. And hopefully be able to get you some information. Welcome in. We're going to be starting here in about 2 minutes at this point. So, like I said, if you have any specific questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. We can start getting some eyes on them, and we're going to kind of work our way through some of the pre-submitted questions. But if you have some stuff, we can go through that as well. No problem at all. All right, we'll get started here in about 30 seconds or so. But while I'm kind of getting it all together here, feel free on the screen. We have two QR codes. The one on the upper right is the support channel, which hosts all these Lunch and Learns. So if you want to watch one back later, as well as we build videos based off of questions that we get in Lunch and Learn. So we build small projects as well as posting all of the Lunch and Learn content on that QR code on the top right. And then the QR code towards the bottom right is a solutions marketplace that we have on our site that has small built out projects and information that you may be able to implement or look over and see how things were built, as well as some of our module information. But it's all a service for you. So again, we have those two QR codes on the screen. Upper right is our channel, which posts these specific Lunch and Learn videos, as well as uh, learning materials based on questions that we are getting frequently in Lunch and Learns. And then on the bottom, we have the solutions marketplace. So we can go ahead and start the process. And for those of you just joining, feel free to put some questions in the chat. Um, all right. Feel free to put some questions in the chat. If you have anything in the Q&A, we're going to get started with some of these pre-submitted questions. These folks aren't in here just yet. We can always review back over it, but I do kind of want to cover some stuff that we have been working on here on the sidelines from the pre-submitted before we get any other questions, in case we can just post these to YouTube and they get the information they need, or if they come in, we can just recap it. So one of the first pre-submitted questions that we got, and again, if you do have a question, if you're in here, any of the three people in here, and if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. We have a couple people on this side of the line that can help you out, but let's chat. Okay, so one of the first questions we got pre-submitted, and if you ever want to pre-submit a question, you can fill it out on the Zoom registration sheet, or you can just email training@decisions.com. So for those of you that might want to work ahead and pre-submit a question, you can email us at training@decisions.com, or you can fill it out on the registration sheet. So the two that we got, one is guidance on creating forms with regards to dependent dropdowns with large lists and the ability to search in the dropdown. Because I don't have a lot of clarity on it right now, I'll kind of just show you a small build in which we were able to get that to work. So I'd have a form, and I was making the assumption that dependent dropdowns meant that one dropdown affects the other. So for this process, again, and I don't really know what the actual context question was, but I can select from a singular dropdown of states, cities, and countries. And when I select one, it populates a large list of cities, or populates a large list of countries, or it populates a smaller list of United States states and abbreviations. So again, if you are watching this later and you wanted to do that, when it comes to searching, one of the features that people may kind of overlook is, say I want to find in this dropdown, I know that I want to utilize Athens or something like that. So for cities, the question they just said, the ability to search in the dropdown list, you should be able to just start typing and it will populate that selected option on that form for you. So again, if I know that I'm going to do a country and I wanted to do Serbia, I can go back through that and go, okay, states, countries, and if I start typing in Serbia, it will select that option for me. So you can search in there. A much larger list, you might have some filtering options you could apply. Say you had a list that had thousands of items, you could put a filter up top that would help you filter through it, but that's kind of the lowest path, the path of least resistance. It's just by typing it in manually. We constructed this, or I constructed this, not we. A singular selection box with static options, and then a second where we utilized the list input source as a flow. And in that flow, we used a string match to path out two different create data steps with a constant, a static fill. You could select from flow on these if you wanted to. And then I utilized the same output name for all of these options, so that when I mapped it out, I mapped out options. So no matter what path we took on this, it would populate that data, because again, all of these outputs have the same data name. So anything more than that, if you want more, again, feel free to drop back into a lunch and learn if you're watching this later. But that's basically out of context from the question I got. I don't know much more. So there's that. And then again, we had this populated from there, list input source, string, and that's how we populated those. Another question that we got pre-submitted. Oh, we got some in the chat here. Let's see if we got some of these. Hi, I'd asked about S3 yesterday. I see the documents to configure and I see the role. Is that role configured to access S3 from the server once this is set? Do I see the S3 options and integration should the server be restarted? I did this setup, but I do not see the S3 option integration, and I use version 9. Okay. Let me see if I know that you were working with Jared yesterday. He might have some more insight of where you're actually at, so you don't have to give me a full. I will unmute you. And thank you for asking a question, by the way. Thank you for attending, and thank you for asking a question. But I think Jared might be able to pick up where you guys left off a little bit easier than I can start from the beginning. But I do have you unmuted if you want to fill in some of the gaps there.
Sure. I saw that in our, I see that in the modules, I was looking at the document. In the modules, AWS, it says it's installed. And the next step in the documentation says that in settings, in the settings down below, yes, there, when you see this AWS option somewhere, at least in ours, I see that. I'm on version 9.
I don't have the module installed, so I'd have to install the
Oh,
module really quickly.
okay.
Yeah, give me
Okay.
one moment here.
Okay.
Applications, designers, module steps. I know there's two ways to get to the marketplace, and it always eludes me what the quickest way is. Oh, here it is. There we go. AWS, you said?
Yes, please.
Is it this? There it is right
Yes,
there.
that one.
We'll see if it goes with some check marks there. Nice. Perfect. All right, back to it.
Yes, now it says that it's installed, right? So if you go to settings, you should, yes, here, if you right click, edit, this was as per this thing. We have an access key and, whatever
Okay.
that is. I entered those. And I need to access basically S3. So if I use temp credentials for S3, if I check that thing, yes, please, I get a role. This is the role which is configured on the server to access the S3 bucket, I would assume, right? Is that correct?
Um, to
Like it,
be to be totally transparent, I don't have the most experience with the AWS and the S3.
okay,
I will see if maybe Jared has some insight, but just by looking at this kind of down the barrel of it, especially if you're trying to configure your server, this is going to be
correct.
something that support will be the best option. I do feel bad for kind of just sending you over to support, but they'll be able to help at least walk you through that process
Okay,
and look at your instance and make sure that everything's provisioned correctly. Whereas on our end, we're going to be kind of um, especially when we don't have these access keys.
okay, no
Or
problem.
the lunch and learn, but yeah, they'll be able to walk you through it a little better, and I can help you submit that support ticket if you would like me to.
No worries. I think if I send an email, it should work, right, to support?
Yeah, yeah, that is definitely the quickest way. Yeah. So if you just email support@decisions.com, it'll create a ticket, but they'll be able to actually look at your use case and they have more training on these specific modules than we would have.
Okay, great. No worries. I will submit a ticket to them. No
There's
worries.
also some great, I was just doing a quick search. There's some good documentation on AWS that will talk about what the role is. If you're trying to figure out what those things, I think there's let me share that in the chat right
Sure.
here. But that any questions on like specifically what that translates to, that would
Hmm.
be an AWS question. That I think on their documents is actually pretty good. So let me just post that in here for you so you can see
Yeah,
it.
this is where I was looking at and I was trying to configure. So I'm assuming it's an IAM role.
Mhm.
That's what they're asking, but I just wanted to confirm that.
I would believe so. Best way to do it is add it and then
Okay.
drag the flow step on the flow canvas, debug it, and see if you get an error in regards to permissioning or something.
Okay.
Because if that's the error that happens, then I think typically be a role kind of thing.
Okay. Okay. I'll try doing that because from what, according to this documentation, if
Mhm.
once I configure it correctly, only then it'll be visible under integration. That option, even like the S3 option or the AWS option. Right now, I don't see it.
I'm confused. Wait. Are you
In
talking about finding the flow steps, or are you talking
Yes,
about? Oh,
like
that's a
this.
different thing. Yeah. So
Oh,
in version 9, you have to
uh-huh.
add that module as a dependency to your project. So
Oh,
for
how do I do
example,
that?
right,
Yeah, I
yeah,
can.
so we could definitely show you that because that's something on our end. So yeah,
Okay.
you just go to your project, and anytime you want to use, so version 8, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't just install the module and add your settings and Bob's your uncle and you use it, right? It doesn't work that
Oh,
way in
okay.
version 9. In version 9, you have to go to your info tab and go to dependencies. So after you've installed it,
Mm-hmm.
and when the dependencies load, you click manage, and then you go to modules, and then you have to check that. Once you check
Okay.
that, then when you go into the flow designer, it will show all of the AWS steps, and
Got
then you
it.
can utilize it. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
So yeah, I think Robert will show you. So when you go there, AWS steps, and then they appear in the same spot, integration and
Yeah, and integration,
And then you have
yes.
Amazon AWS, and boom, you get all the stuff.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, that was the question. Yes, I think the
Got
rules
it.
I'll be able to figure it out. But
Mhm.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
I need to do
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you guys. Okay. And thank you guys for the questions. We got another one in the chat from Elon. I'll let you speak. That is a good, that is something that I have seen 100 times, but I don't know if there's any lore behind it. But the question is there any reason why decisions automatically sets null dates to uh, the new year of 1752? We have a case entity that tracks the different states of candidates depending on a candidate status. In our main flow, we have some rules set in place to determine the course of action needed for that candidate depending on their status. So for example, if they are in a hired status, then a form requiring the user to enter the hired date will pop up. The same sequence occurs for 2 other states. We set the unused components to ignore in the create entity detail step. However, on the front end page report, it shows that date instead of null. So when users do not need to enter in that actual date, when you go to report on it, it shows that as that date instead of null. That is a good question. Let's see if we can figure out some kind of workaround. And I think I do, yep, I have you unmuted, so feel free to fill in some of the gaps there if you'd like.
Yeah, I think I think it's all there pretty much. That's the issue that we're having. We just don't want it to show up as that date. We just want it to remain null.
Okay, let me think here. Path of least resistance here. So on the form itself, you have it that field set to ignore. So and you have it as an optional field on the form so that if people don't fill it out, it auto fills that date. Is that correct?
So we in our main form or flow, we have a form where like if they're adding a new candidate, they can input all the details required, and that's where they would input the status as well. And then we also have a set of rules that, so like if they're in this status, like hired status, it'll go through a different course of actions where another form will pop up requiring them to put in the hired date. We have the same thing happening for like the offer status or term status. But we also have like if it's not going through any of those courses of actions, depending on the rule, it'll just,
Oh,
we have like in the create uh, entity detail step, we have
yeah.
those set to ignore.
Yeah, so it might not even be with the forms. It might be create. Let's see if I have anything on mine. Built out on this one. Let's see, hop over here. I got version 8, version 9 here. Let's see if I can run some stuff. No, I guess this is higher date. No, I'll look into it. So something loosely like this, if on your start date you have it set to ignore, and if you leave it ignored when you report on it later, it's null. If that data doesn't get populated in another place.
Yeah, that's what we want it to show up as null in the report on the page, but it shows up as the 1752.
Interesting.
And we even tried setting it to null instead of
Yeah.
ignore, and it still shows up as that date. And it seems to be doing that just for all like that's just its automatically set date for ignore or null. Because if we edit it and change it and we were to input a higher date, it changes along with it, it updates.
Okay. You cannot say, someone's saying you cannot save a null date to a database. And I'm not sure how true that is in every version, but um, I'm trying to think of a logical workaround. I do know that in some other um, projects that we have, and maybe this,
Have
um,
you, Elon, have you configured the can null checkbox to be configured on the data structure you're using?
That's a good question. Let me check.
Because that's not the reason why it comes up with that default date is that's an SQL kind of thing where it just fills that date. We do have the ability, you can just right click that, the stored data structure. Yeah, right click that. You do have the ability to say, hey, like we got the application date, right? So left click on that kind of data member there, and then you can say allow null value, and then it will show up blank instead of, for January 1st, 1753 or December 31st, 1752.
Okay. Okay, that might be the issue actually. We don't have
Yeah,
that checked, so okay, I'll
gotcha.
give that a go.
An important thing to keep note though, when you
Yeah,
do this, this isn't going to retroactively fix your old data, right? So when you check this, you'll still have the December 31st, 1752 on all your old data because that's already been created. It's when you create new data, then you can see if then that field should be blank.
got you. Okay, so I have to create a new candidate. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, well, I'll give that a go. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. And I'm going to show you one more thing. Let me think of the uh, tiles here. Another thing that we have utilized in the past, and this is a light workaround, but it's just a logic thing, and anyone else in the lobby might find it useful, is sometimes when we don't want null values, it's not on this one. We'll create a a rule that says if the value is null, and then go to a create data step that will have a like a random date or a random string value so that we could populate it from that as well. I'm trying to find one on one of our tiles. I do know that we do that with a path here, maybe on this one. Nope, that's totally blank. That ain't it. Nope, that's blank as well. We'll try here. So the last place we'll try, but that could be an option for you as well as creating a rule that says, hey, if this value is null, send it down a different path, and then with that path, you can use a create data step to populate a value that you see fit that's more appropriate than 1752.
Okay.
We'll see if we can load this up while we're kind of, and this is one of the training containers, so it is running a little bit slow at the moment. My local host is cooking here. Let's see. Yeah, my training instance is melting, but yeah, we essentially have a rule that'll populate with a create data, and the true path, or sorry, the false path will go right to your next step, but then in the middle we'll have a create data step that will create a variable and will send that path through. But I think that what Jared said is probably going to work for you.
Okay, I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys. Thank all y'all. Any more questions in the chat? If not, I'm going to go to another pre-submitted question and just kind of get that information out there so that if someone decides to watch it later, they can follow up on it. Ping. Any more questions in the chat before we run? So here's a loose example of that logic. When how we utilize this is when we're creating tile data, it's just an analogy here. When we're creating tile data, we want to reference, how many approved applications we have for this particular project. But if there are none, we fetch no information. We just used a create data step with the count variable on both sides and said, hey, if it goes down this path, we just put in an actual like hard constant rather than on the create data step we utilize for the results path, we utilize the count of the entity results. So some type of build logic like that might help you too if you want to just populate something that's more relevant and more friendly looking than that 1752 date. You could utilize maybe two create data steps with a path that says, hey, if this happens, we're going to utilize the count, or we're going to utilize the actual variable that comes from before. And if something, if there's a null value, you can put in a hard constant and then choose your path in which that thing gets populated or written to that create step. But hopefully that null step that Jared showed you works. The last pre-submitted question we had was about grid lists and data grids and how they work and how to reorder the variables for data entry. So they had a grid list. Let's see if we can pull one up here. And I'll kind of just do some building and some of the logic behind it. So flows, lunch and learn. Perfect. So within this data grid, my guess was, and again, they're not in here specified, but my guess was that they were utilizing just a traditional data grid. So with the data grid, we'll kind of just show you two options here. And the data grid is going to allow you to count. And I'm going to go ahead and just populate, well, I'll wait on that actually. But we'll put a button just so we can continue our path. All right, boom, boom, boom. Right here. Before we do this, we're going to need to fetch those entities. We're just doing the account structure, but you can utilize this for any logic that you want or any database you have. But we're going to say we're going to fetch all of the accounts with no no filtering. We're just going to get every single account, and then we're going to take those entity results and map it in for the list of accounts. Love that. So the question that they had, from my recollection of it or my understanding of it, is that they aren't really by default given the options to adjust the order of these. So they are presented in a format that is not friendly to their end user. Some of these things can be rearranged, but they might want some more of this information to be on the front than on the back, and want that to be shown to the user in a way that they want. So what I would recommend for that user is rather than using a data grid, you can use one of the newer ones. It depends on which version of Decisions you're on, but you can use an advanced data grid. And what this will allow you to do is parse that same information, but using a report. So from here, I can say, okay, we're going to do still an account. And we're going to do the source. And what this will allow us to do is add the fields in the order that we want. So we can go email address, we can go is active, and say we just want those two fields rather than the data grid provisioning. The advanced is just going to give you more insight. And for those of you that might be interested, you can also make some of this stuff editable. So can edit if I wanted to. Here, can edit. And I can turn on some inline editing options here. Output data name, account change information, account change. So the advantage of that advanced data grid, again, because we were able to parse it by report, we can order those in the way that we want so that when we go through that process, it gives us only the things we want in the order we want them. with some more editing options. And some of these stuff it's not going to let you edit because it's part of the internal system here. But that'll give you more options with the advanced data grid over the data grid itself. So do we have any more questions in the chat? We got 2 pre-submitted questions and 2 customer questions in. But I'm gladly willing to take on some more stuff if anybody has anything for me. All right. Well, we did 32 minutes. We did 4 questions in 30 minutes. Feeling pretty good about that. So we will be back next week. We'll have this mixed and up on YouTube in the next 30 minutes or so. But I just want to say I'm appreciative that everyone stopped in today. So thank you guys very much. And we will see you guys next week.
I had a quick question on YouTube.
Yeah, of course.
How can I access it? Like
Yeah.
these recorded ones?
Yeah, no problem. The quickest way to do it is we have this QR code up here. I'll kind of leave this on the screen, but you can also, if you just go to youtube.com and if you type in decision support, our channel will show up, decision support. So that this is, and these are the ones from if you look on here, we have some from, I upload them personally every single day. So I got to rename that one, but yeah, so they're on there every single day.
Sure. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you guys.